In the next of this series of interviews to do with the jig competition and history of the jig competition, we have Mr. John Braithwaite. John is, of course, currently festival director, but some of you may not be aware that John was a fine Morris dancer in his day with Oyster Morris, also introducer Green Man with the Oyster Morris, and has a long history of relating to the Morris and also to the jig competition. So, first question, John, what's your earliest memory of the jig competition?
Earliest memory? I'm not sure, Chris, that I have any early memories anymore. You know how it is. Well, of course, there's 1991, which was probably the best year the jig competition has had, which was when I was comparing it, the one and only time that you weren't comparing it. It was a particularly fine event as far as I remember, and that's about the limit of what I remember, except maybe we had a few less judges and possibly also a few less competitors and far less competence.
Indeed, yes. We are, of course, as you point out, the only two people who've ever emceed the competition, so exalted company.
Well, indeed, yeah. I'd have to say that my once against your how many?
Yes,
A lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. Yes.
well, we have voted every year and you've never got back in, John.
Well, that's because, Chris, I withdrew my name strategically just before the vote because one doesn't like to be, to receive nil point.
Indeed. For the wider audience, John and I were both arena MCs many, many years ago and go back further than that. You've been an audience member in most of the competitions. How have you seen the competition over the years develop?
Well, obviously, from its very, very early beginnings, which was obviously a wonderful thing to set up. It was a great idea to commemorate John and his love of jig dancing, and it obviously it was something that was either going to happen or it wasn't, if you like. And it's happened in spades. It's absolutely blossomed. So that in almost every respect, the way it's produced now, the fact that it is streamed all over the world, the fact that the sorts of things that you now look for, and in fact, some of the things you actually dropped looking for. The idea that presentation, which to me, presentation was very important always, and the idea that presentation, not just for a Morris team when they're out rather than shambling on and shambling off and dancing badly, but actually presentation as an individual to a big audience, as many people as we could possibly get into that venue. It seemed to me to be always an important aspect. You are an individual showing off. You have to be. It's a jig, and it doesn't have to be just technically right. So it's so important that the music is taken into account, the way the dance is presented, and every aspect of it, not just the individual person and the accuracy of what they're doing.
Excellent.
Which doesn't answer your question, but there we are.
That's a good enough answer for me. When talking to previous winners in other interviews, there's a general feeling that of the venues we've had, the Blackmoor is definitely the favoured venue. Whilst I'm sure you can't give us a 25-year lease on it, not that we're paying, but as
that's the thought.
In the future, are you anticipating the Blackmoor still being around that we'll be able to use going forward?
Very much so, yes. Yeah, very much so. We've had, you may or may not believe that we've actually been thinking about 2021 and trying to think about what the environment might be like then. It's quite difficult, as anyone can easily appreciate in any country watching this, to know what their environment will be like in 2 months, let alone 12 months. And so it's something that we've had to think about, and there may be changes in the way that the festival is set up. As a response to that, hopefully positive ones, but the Blackmoor is not one which will change. It will be there. It may get moved at some point in the future, but not next year.
Okay. That's a macro view. In terms of a micro view, is there anything from your perspective you think you would change with the jig competition or encourage change?
Do you mean through the bottom of an empty glass? Is that the sort of thing you're thinking of?
Yes.
As a micro view. Well, personally, I'd like to see you have a better venue, really, a bigger venue. That's looking at it from a festival director point of view. There are too many people wanting to get in, too many people not being able to see this wonderful event well enough. So I would love us to find a way of giving you more space, giving you more room, making it work more easily. Obviously, those who know Sidmouth well will understand, and have actually walked around the outside of the Blackmoor venue, will realise that it's more or less surrounded by trees. It's sort of shoehorned into an avenue of trees, between two rows of trees. So that actually makes things a little more difficult. But I'd certainly like that to happen. I'd like to make sure that the gender balance keeps strong. There have been some really wonderful dances by all of the entrants, and it is really important. I'm just thinking of one particular person who I knew very well, who was the first one. Probably, did she win? I think she did, didn't she?
I'm trying to think who you're thinking of.
Well, the young lady from Oyster Morris at the time.
Yes, you did. Yes.
Yeah, and I must say, I thought that was really a sort of turning point in a way. Not a turning point, but it meant that not only was her quality of dancing recognised, but the fact that you didn't have to be 180 yards off the ground, which is more difficult. It meant that we were looking for, you were looking at the right things. So I'm hoping that will continue. Yeah, 4-person jigs, I think that might be nice, if there's a bit more space, 6-person jigs, or a Morris set even. There used to be a Morris dance competition, as you remember, a long, long, long time ago.
I do indeed.
I wonder, as you're asking me the questions, I've no reason to suppose that I'm not allowed to ask you whether you've ever thought of branching out into the Morris competition rather than just the jig competition.
It's a conversation we've had with some others. Mike Boston, I remember being one, talking about it. It would be lovely to have a dance competition back again. The challenge is that there are so many different genres, and how you judge Cotswold versus Northwest versus Border versus Molly, etc., etc. I could see it would be easier to have a Cotswold dance competition or a Molly dance competition, but more challenging to judge across all of the different genres. And I think that's the sticking point. That's not to say it's insurmountable.
No, it is. You're right. It's a very difficult one. The other thing that makes that tricky is that although we have a lot of book sides these days, people do find it more difficult to be there at the right time. So you can get a pair of dancers there, or an individual, relatively straightforwardly, and more difficult to get 6 or 8 people there.
Yes, and particularly if it's not held over the weekend, and we
Yeah.
wouldn't lose our Sunday afternoon spot, and
No.
you put it into
Well, there's a lot going on. I suppose we could have this. I know we're going off target here, but we could have a sort of roving reporter, secret agent, going along the seafront and checking out and making an award.
That's true. Yes.
All the 20 or so Morris teams who perform on the seafront, they suddenly find that they've won the, well, let's hope it's the Ballon d'Or or something suitable,
Yeah.
rather than the little yellow rubber duck, which would also be a coveted prize, I'm sure, for those who came last.
One of the things that the jig competition has succeeded at, and I don't take credit for this, I'm just fronting it, emceeing it, but it has the respect of the Morris world. And I think by the end, the ritual dance competition had lost that. And whilst the idea of having a roving judge or judges along the front is an interesting one and may well work, whatever was done to be successful and to be lasting, it would need the Morris world to say this is a great competition. We want to be part of it, or at least support it.
Yeah, and that's something the jig competition has done so successfully, is by raising its I think it's really fundamentally by raising its standards and having all the other adjuncts to it of the way that it's judged, etc. But basically, I think it's down to raising the standard so much that one could hardly contemplate the Morris world not getting behind it.
Indeed, and there's potential for a dance team competition to do the same. It just needs thinking through sufficiently.
Well, as you probably remember, the well, we're in the days of virtual competition. So the virtual fisticuffs, which broke out when the ritual dance competition result was announced, were not particularly pleasant things to witness. So I think the difficulties you alluded to just now, judging between the various genres, would make it a heck of a difficult one. And oh, hello. Oh, there we are. Yeah, it would make it really difficult. But the jig competition, I don't know that I'm not sure my knowledge of dance goes far enough to know if there are other solo dance opportunities which are. I mean, does Northwest have a solo dance? I mean, there must be an opportunity for a solo dance in Northwest.
There are clog dance, of course, competitions.
Indeed, yeah, yeah,
Very much so.
but not in the Northwest
No.
professional type of dance that we see. I mean, that could be something for them to work on.
Well, yes, I mean, we've never said that it needs to be a Cotswold jig, and we've got Molly jigs, and we've had
Yeah,
border jigs. So yes, there's scope. But we did say that we didn't want clog step because that has its own tradition and competitions, in the same way as we wouldn't want Irish dancing. Not decrying those great traditions, but they have their own competitions.
yeah, they do, and I think you're right not to tread in those areas, because that doesn't really achieve anything apart from splitting the vote, so to speak.
Okay, well, that's a grand ramble through the jig competition and
A grand tour, I think,
I'm
Chris.
sure potential for other competitions. I think that's probably everything that we need to cover, unless you've got any other thoughts, any other pearls of wisdom.
Well, thoughts maybe, pearls of wisdom, probably not. I suppose it would be lovely to think of the jig competition doing some very, very special things to commemorate its various anniversaries. And there'll be opportunities as the festival celebrates its anniversaries. There'll be opportunities for the jig competition to do similarly and to present some special things. For example, I'm feeling somehow that the jig competition might well be stronger after this year because of the opportunity that you might choose to give for people not to be attending in person.
Yes, yes. I did wonder whether jig dancing was the future of Morris because it can be socially distanced much easier than set dancing.
Well, especially solo jig dancing, yes.
Yes,
Yeah. As long as the musician doesn't get anywhere near the dancer, you're in, aren't you, really? Or they don't get too near the audience. Yeah, I'm just thinking that that would open up the opportunity for people to enter the jig competition, even though they're not at the festival.
indeed.
Not everybody comes to Sidmouth, sadly.
No, no, and certainly we've got more entries from different countries further afield. Yes, it begs the question when we are back in 2021 with a live competition, whether there is some form of virtual competition as well. But I'm not offering that and saying that's going to happen.
But surely I heard it first on Zoom, didn't I?
Well, we'll leave it on that note and
Well, we'll leave that hanging in the
hanging.
air, shall we?
Yes, indeed, indeed.
That's been lovely, Chris. Thank you very much for inviting me to share my ramblings with you and with other people as well. I wish you all the very, very best on Sunday, the 2nd of August. That's right. I'll be there, but not there in the ether. I shall be in Sidmouth, but not there watching. I'll be there. Sorry, no, I'm going to start this again. I'm going to start this again. I should be there watching it, but not the real event, which is a pity.
Yes.
But all very best to everyone entering, musicians, judges, etc. You're really upholding a wonderful tradition, and we look forward very much to that being always part of the festival.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, John. That's been great. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Got to go and feed the cat now.